Recording. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. So let's. So today I thought I would take a theoretical approach because yesterday we discussed a lot of codes and other things, right?
Mm.
So that is helpful for operating the actual codes, but how you kind of come up with idea of doing the load forecasting, right? So that's the main question I want to help you answer, is that suppose if if you had zero background in load forecasting, how you start? So this is what I think is better question to ask, right? So that you can not only just work with what I have done, but also in future going forward you can come up with your own model from scratch. So I can share my PowerPoint presentation that I prepared. I already shared it on the channel.
Mm.
Did you have a chance to
Yeah.
look at it?
E-
I
Yeah.
mean, you don't have to. I will cover it. Do you see my screen?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so I mean, this is just for, I'm thinking about the new person, right? Who is going to come to join your team. So that's why I give this slide. So electrical load forecasting is really important for the operational purpose. Not, I mean, it is also important for us as well, right? But generally, it is important uh, for the utility or ISO to manage or plan accordingly. So most of the important decisions are based on some kind of forecast. So your forecast have to be accurate, right? Because forecast is eventually transformed into decision. So that's what really important. So if someone asks you what is forecasting, you will answer that, well, forecasting is a process of generating some numbers to eventually come up with some decision, right? Based on past observation. So this is what forecasting is. So then uh, types of load forecast. So eventually, currently in our company, we only focus on short-term forecasting. So short-term forecasting is kind of like one from 1 hour ahead to almost 7 day. So this is short-term forecasting. So then there are another two types of forecasting, is mid-term forecasting and long-term forecasting. So mid-term forecasting can be like, hey, how the load profile would look like 3 months, 6 months, or 1 year. So this is mid-term forecasting. And then long-term forecasting, suppose what is the actual load growth or load decline or whatever, right? 50 years from now on. So you have to come up with that number. But to do that, you cannot really use the hourly data, right? Because hourly data is too much granular for long-term load forecasting. So for long-term load forecasting, you can use daily level data, because in the long term forecast you are not necessarily worried about the seasonality of the day and night or weekend or week. You are not really worried about that. You are worried about the peak load. Usually what is the eventual yearly peak load will going to be. So this is what you actually look into long term load forecast. So if each type of forecast is basically kind of can be a master's thesis in itself. So some people focus on short term forecasting, some people focus on mid-term forecasting, some people focus on long-term forecasting. So mid-term forecasting, one of the important question is that how the load will look like next summer. So this is a very good question for medium-term load forecasting, right? Within 1 year. So medium-term load forecasting, you can use hourly data as well. So any question here? Okay. So this picture is taken from a magazine. So to know what, like, by load forecasting, what do I really mean, right? What is load? Load is just the electricity demand, and electricity demand has some characteristic by meaning that it is based on people behavior, right? People sleep, people wake up, people go to work, people eat, people come back home. So based on that, the energy demand varies across the day. Then it also have weekend effect, right? Because in weekend people do not go to work, people stay at home. So usually Saturday, Sunday, the load profile, the value of the load profile looks really different from what the working day looks like, right? Because working day factories are open because people go to work. So that's why your load forecasting model has to capture this variation. How you will do that, we'll discuss. But at first, you have to understand what are the different components of a load forecast. So to do that, this picture is really helpful. So then these two pictures, uh, I think it is really well known to you, so it doesn't necessarily have to be that much. So this is, both pictures are weekly profiles, right? As you can see, some weeks have higher peak load than other weeks. But if you plot in 3D, it will look like this. So any questions here? Just a data
Mm,
visualization, nothing else.
yeah, understood.
Okay, so then from that, so this, if you have this kind of data, what are the different methods that you have in your, I would say, load forecasting methodology? So there are many research on load forecasting models, right? Because most of the models are trying to focus on autoregressive moving average method. They are called ARMA methods. So what is ARMA methods? As you can see, at any given point in time, if you want to model the load may be modeled by this equation. So yt can be the load at time t, which is dependent on t minus 1, meaning the exact before time load. Then it can have history up to p. So p is up to you. So suppose your current day load is dependent on just before hours load, or it can be dependent on like last 168 points of load. 168 meaning that 1 week worth of load, right? 24 multiplied by 7. So it is up to you how you choose the value of p. So how many of the past sample that you're going to include in your load forecast, right? So that is, you have to decide, but generally it can be expressed as this. And then there are other terms, which is AT. AT is kind of like the noise or error. So usually the ARMA method, what the ARMA method do is that the error of individual times of forecast is actually also added as a regressor in the model, right? So if I have, suppose I am forecasting for hour 1. So the previous, so the past day, what I can calculate is the forecast versus actual of the past day, and take the error term and also include it as my predictor, right, for the regression model. So it is like taking not only the individual values of the past, also in your past forecast versus actual, the actual value of error, you will also add it as a predictor or as any input. So the error of the past is also included in your input. So you have to write some code to kind of like come up with all this x, so past values plus error of past forecast plus past actual. So these terms, eventually this term is going to constitute your x of the regression, and y is the actual load. So this is one of the method, very early method. Like people started applying this method maybe from 1950s. So very early regression method, they have done it. So in the past, people used this technique a lot. Even today, any sort of time series model, load forecasting, temperature forecasting, electricity price forecasting, all sorts of forecasting, tourism forecasting, traffic forecasting, they all use this method. So any question on this method? We are not using this method, by the way, because this method is prone to a lot of error, because they use they do not use machine learning to estimate the parameters. So by parameter, I am meaning that the chi1 to chi p, then theta 1, theta q, right? These are all coefficients of the regression. So if someone asks you to build a model for any time series, you can just shift the time series by maybe p up to p lags, and then create your data set and make a make a I would say regression model, and you will have a good enough regression model of the time series. So if anybody gives you any time series data, now you know at least one method without knowing a lot of other things, that how you can reshape the time series data into a XY type of format, and you can then apply all sorts of machine learning algorithm for the regression on top of that, right? It will give you good enough uh, accuracy, at least. I mean, at least something to start with.
Mm.
So when I got hired at the first week, I started to learn about it, and I did some ARIMA methods on the first week of my job at Empowered. So I didn't really understood a lot about ARIMA method at that time, because I was just looking into different blogs and other things, like how do people do time series modeling, right? So this is one way to do it. So, but you have to remember the ARIMA method is only work on when the time series has no seasonality. You have to remove these periodic components from your signal before you can apply the ARIMA method. You can apply you can apply ARIMA method on a periodic signal, but the accuracy will not be that good.
So without seasonalities, like the time series will have only just trend, right? So it will just
Yeah,
uh,
trend is okay.
so
Trend is
it's
okay.
it's only for like trending time series signal, something
I
like that.
mean, the thing is that you can you I would say that the ARIMA method is applicable to any sort of time series. You can apply it with trend or seasonality, but I would say the seasonal component, if the time series has seasonal
Hmm.
component, the accuracy will not be that good. That's all I'm saying.
Oh, okay, okay, makes sense.
So because any time series has two components, one is deterministic component and one is stochastic component. So ARMA is good for stochastic part, not the deterministic part, because deterministic part is fixed, right? It is not changing. If you extract that Fourier components from the signal, because they are like fixed, right? As you can see, the seasonality of day night seasonality is the same. Weekend week seasonality is the same, right? Winter summer seasonality is the same. So these signals do not really change that much. So your load can be thought can be hypothesized as combination of deterministic components plus stochastic error component. So first, I mean, my approach is always, if I see that some load is seasonal, I try to understand what is the frequency, hidden frequency in that signal. So then I add the Fourier terms, and then other features to kind of like take care of the error component. Is it understood? It is really like I mean, it is really important to understand that you can apply ARMA to any sort of time series, but to get better accuracy, you have to, if you can isolate the deterministic part of the signal, or kind of like a constant part of the signal first, then the rest, which is the stochastic part, then ARIMA will give you very good result.
Hmm. Okay, makes sense.
So this technique is actually taught on the signal processing course that is called random process in electrical engineering. I do not know whether, Eugene, you have heard about this course or not, but in our university, Habibana University, there is this course called
Hmm.
random
Random.
random process, random signals and process, which is actually taught by the end of third year. So that in that course, this technique, I did not take this course because I was not a communication major. I was a power major, so I was not able to take this course. But this technique is actually taught there. But the people or the mindset or the maturity level at that period of our time, we do not have that. So even though professors teach this technique, I have seen most of my friends really did not understand any of it, zero understanding, but they are really taught about this. So maybe one or two students in the class understand this technique, but almost 99% of the students have no idea of how to use this technique. So this is a common technique. You can have it in your I should say, in your arsenal or in your tools library, that you know this technique for any time series. You can now reshape the time series and apply linear regression, and then you can have a good time series model. So now you are open to all time series.
Hmm.
So this is one technique. Then another technique is the way I talked about, the Fourier analysis technique, right? So the Fourier analysis technique is, in the theory, in the time series theory, they call it general exponential smoothing. I do not understand why. I have no idea. Like why it is called exponential smoothing, because Fourier terms can be explained by e to the power something, right? Remember, Fourier terms can be expressed as e to the power minus I j omega t,
Yeah.
phasor and other things. Remember phasor from the first part? So that's why they call it exponential smoothing. But I just call it Fourier method because it is expressing time series as a regressors are actually sine cos, right? Your x in the time series, sorry, your x in the regression problem are basically multiplication of sine and cos. So yesterday we talked about this, right? We talked about how to use different seasonal components as a sine and cos. So you add, for every frequency component you identify, you have to add two terms, sine and cos. So this is one technique. So people, if you do not, sometimes people do not really know the seasonal or the actual value of the seasonal components. So suppose you do not necessarily do not know how to do the fast Fourier transform. So you do not know the frequency component beforehand, or you cannot really estimate. So how do you do that? So I have seen people just generate hundreds of frequency components and then use feature selection to come up with the seasonality. Right? You can generate like hundreds of sine cos terms for different values of frequency, and then after you fit the regression model, and after you fit the regression model with not only linear regression, you can use lasso or elastic net. You can find out which coefficients are valuable, and then you can estimate the value of the sine cos from that. So this is one technique, right? So this is a good technique to have in your like time series analysis toolbox. So now your toolbox becoming bigger. Now you know that you can add past terms plus error terms, and now you can add sine cos terms. So you see your time series analysis knowledge is growing. Now you know how to come up with time series feature. This is all feature engineering, right? So you can have as many of sine cos feature you want. So in our model we can use only two, because we only have daily seasonal and weekly seasonal, right? We can add four features based on the seasonality. So
For
you can,
weekly, one sine, one cos, and for daily, one sine, one cos.
yes.
Hmm.
So this is the table 3. If you can look at it, table 3, I took it from a paper. So in that paper, they add 11 sine cos components because the whole model was based on sine cos. Okay, so they have C is the actually beta naught, right? What is the intercept term of regression? And then you have the number of K. So they used 11 terms without giving any reason how do they come up with that number, without any reason. So they just used it, right? They have 11, or by 11 meaning that you have almost how many? 22. So you can just fit your time series by only sine cos as well, with random number of sine cos terms. So that is also a good fitting technique, right? Do you see it?
Okay. Like without any coefficient, you mean?
No, I mean without any logic of why 11.
Oh, okay.
I mean they did not mention why 11 because their model give good performance at 11. Maybe they did some hyperparameter optimization and they come up with that number. So you can try it on any, like I suggest you go ahead and maybe try it in your, if you have free time, you try with this model in your machine. Just generate those features first and then feed some XGBoost or whatever to see the error. Okay.
Mm.
So so you understand it, right? The root mean squared error is not really that great. Do you see?
Mhm.
Is because you just using only sine cos feature for the whole time series. I mean, that that should give you, like, you have to ultimately you have to do some ensembling. Like if you use exponential smoothing and then use ARMA, finally you have to have an ensemble model or meta model, right? Finally you have to have it, otherwise the error will become just too much.
Mm.
So this is another technique. So I mean, I'm showing you, you can ask the interview, like, do you know about exponential smoothing? Tell me about exponential smoothing. Like if he knows, you understand that, hey, this guy knows time series. But do not expect him, right? Do not expect him to know it. Like general machine learning course will never teach you this. Like these are very, these techniques are really only for time series, right? So nobody really uses in regression or classification or whatever. So that's why I've seen that many people who are really good in machine learning, they really struggle, like really struggle for 3-4 months in time series, because the techniques of time series are really different. Yes, it is a regression problem. Ultimately, time series is a regression problem. But how you come up with the feature is really important.
Mm.
So now you have very good understanding, right? How to come up with features for time series based problem.
Mm.
Okay. So
Makes
then
sense.
I found another model in another paper. So they just, this is called heuristic method. Heuristic method is just like, it is not a method. It is like a hack. So if you have a forecast and you have an actual, how to tweak, the forecast by multiplying it with some error term. Do you see, Habib?
Mhm.
So this is F1 is forecast they got, and they added this delta YH to that forecast.
Mm.
So then they come up with the final forecast FF. So
Okay.
how they calculate delta YH? So this is the equation. So they come up with this hacky equation to add it, and then their accuracy of the forecast increase. So you have to do, like, if you do not do any ensembling, I mean, in my model to forecast, I will ask you that I actually calculated the average hour for every hour. So you tell the engineers to add this error terms with the actual forecast. Then the actual error will increase. Then the actual accuracy will increase, because even though the XGBoost is fitting a lot of very very good models, but the actual error there is persistent, right? You have seen 100 megawatt, almost 200 megawatt some hours. So if you can take the average hour of that specific hour and add it on top of the forecast, then your forecast becomes good. So this is called heuristics in forecasting. So after you observe that there is a pattern of error in your actual versus forecast, then you come up with intelligent ways to reduce the error. So that way you can estimate the error by some of your intelligent thoughts and thinking. So this is one of the way you can do it. So they use,
Like, is it saying that, for example, at hour 17th, I know, like, before all, in all the Wednesday on 17, I know, like, if my model forecast, like, for example, 10,000, I will just add
200
100,
megawatt on top of
100
it.
megawatt, then it will be more accurate,
Yeah,
something like
exactly.
that,
So
like.
this is called heuristic method. So if you know that error is constantly occurring in your forecast, that means you know it. Like you know the prediction of the error. So then you add it on top of your forecast, because your model is biased, right? Your model is always giving you 200 megawatts of less forecast for some reason. You do not know why, but you know that if you add those 200 megawatts, your forecast improves. So this is called heuristic method.
Makes sense.
There's like
So
some adjustments
yeah,
after.
exactly. It is adjustment. So I think if
Manual
you,
adjustment, yes.
yes, so that this is called heuristic method or expert method. It is expert method. So for some reason, yes, it is expert because time series forecasting is really difficult. So for one model, it is really difficult to explain all the error. So you have to augment your forecast always, always. Even ISO, I don't think ISO gives you pure forecast from any model. They always give you augmented forecast. So this is one method I found in one paper. So they use plus, they add error in summer and they subtract in winter. So that means their model was over predicting in winter and under predicting in summer. So that's why they do opposite, right?
And how did they
Understood.
derive this delta YH?
How did they derive? Like this
Like
is what
from
we are
previous, this is also a like machine learning problem. Like
yeah,
from
Okay.
the previous data, like they kind of assume like it can be the simplest way can be like average.
average.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay. Okay. I see.
So you can, like, average is not a safe way, like,
Mm-hmm.
because the distribution is not normal, right? Because if the distribution is skewed, then the most probable value is not the mean, it is the median. So you have to think about it. If the median is,
Medium,
if the distribution is normal or not,
median.
right? So you can, rather than mean, you can use median. I think that way it is better.
Yeah, it's a good approach because we see that like in our forecasting, right? Like
Yes.
sometimes
Yeah, I mean, it
constant
is like,
error.
this is not something new that only we are experiencing. Everybody is experiencing the same problem in load forecasting literature, because otherwise, so why people publish this paper, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because nobody's forecast is accurate, to be honest with you. So they always have to come up with some adjustment.
Yeah.
And in this case, they do not tell you how they come up with F1 and F2. It is their secret.
For example, like normally Thomas or someone who like calls a peak, they
Yes,
sometimes like manipulate their thought, like
exactly.
game theory or something. So this is kind of like heuristic approach, right? Like
Yes.
assuming that it will be less than 100 megawatt because one company
Yes,
might
it is
reduce
common.
their
It is
loss.
common everywhere. Even in big companies, they do it. So, and I'm showing you a proof already in the paper. So you have to augment it. Like, no forecast will give you accurate results. So ensembling will reduce your error, but even then it will have some error. So you can use this heuristic sort of method, by, like, if you see how they did it. So they like they calculated delta YH by the zeroth hour forecast, based on the actual versus forecast at the hour zero, and then they multiply it with by 24 minus H divided by 24. So like, it is really interesting, like, how did they come up with this idea? Like, I have no way of knowing. So but they tell you, right? They tell you how they did it. So somehow they come up with this equation, and then they come up with delta T multiplied by F1, F2, and multiplied by 25. So I think it is because they're using Fahrenheit data. That's why these values are there. Here is, if you're using Celsius data, your value will be different. So F1, F2 may be based on operator's knowledge. Suppose if someone wants to call a peak, you will set F1 equal to 1. So that will give you a large error, and then you'll have a call, you'll have a peak.
Makes sense.
So always you have to correct for load forecasting. So this is what I think. Most of the time, I think if I were employed in this company, most of the time I would do this going forward. Adjustment, because once you have a model, right? You just train it with new data and you come up with a forecast. But what you actually have to do is to monitor the error, and then come up with this heuristic method continuously. That's it. So you guys have to do it. I mean, let the guy who is the data scientist make the model, and then you do this. You have to come up with this intelligent, like, because you are the expert, right? That's why it is called expert model, to be honest with you. This is called expert model because expert will give his knowledge on top of the model. So that's why it is called expert model.
Makes sense.
So, I mean, if someone, like, by this time, like at this point in time, I think you guys are really ready to do your own load forecasting, right? Like if anyone has this background, even these 3 slides, he's ready. He's ready to do load forecasting by himself. At least that I can guarantee. So I have gone through hundreds of videos. Nobody tells how really start load forecasting easily like this. Like I have been through a lot of videos on load forecasting, but I have always seen that people do not right away tell you how to do it. Like they show you code, blah blah blah, whatever, but just if you can tell me how to come up with ideas, anybody can become a data scientist, right? But that is most important. Like nobody tells you how to come up with the idea that I show you here. Like if you look for materials on the internet, you will not find anything that is similar to here what I present to you on load forecasting. So nobody tells you that you need to add expert model on top of your model, because no model is accurate. Never. It is really difficult because models can capture the general thing really well, but at very, like at the actual level, sometimes there is always some error. 200 megawatt, 300 megawatt, 400 megawatt. So how you come up with the model for the error in itself? So you can fit machine learning model on the error in itself, right? Or you can do this expert analysis, expert based method, like you come up with your own rule. So then finally is multiple linear regression. I think this is like just kind of summarizing everything that you have already seen, right? So multiple linear regression is just regression basically. So multiple meaning that you have multiple inputs in your regression model. So I will not really go into details here, right? Because it is self-explanatory.
So basically, like the summary is the multiple linear regression here, like the regressors like x1, x2, and x3, those can be modeled or can come through ARMA process
Exactly.
or and also
The
the second
exponential smoothing.
exponential process.
Yes. And then maybe some feature you can come up with by yourself from the expert model as well. So you all, like, hundreds of features you just gather, right, for the multiple linear regression. That's what I did. Like you come
For
up with,
example, like you added the last hour AIL data or like previous month, previous week's AIL data. Those are like ARMA method, right? Kind of
yes,
ARMA method.
you're thinking about ARMA process, and then sine cost thinking about the exponential smoothing, and then the other ones are just binary variables, right? So that's just come up with holidays, come up you, and then you kind of like think about the interaction. You have all the weather items, weather variables, right? Weather variables, then you can also have lagged weather variables, right? So lagged weather variables means the forecast at that hour plus the previous hour, then the hour before that, like however you want.
Yeah, I think AESO does that too. Like they add the recency effect for the temperature too,
Yes, exactly. So
up to
this is the
24
for the
hours.
version 2. For the version 2, I am taking this recency effect.
Mm-hmm.
So when I share the code with you tomorrow or the next day, you will see it.
Okay.
So this is all basically regression is, right? You come up with different ideas and then you convert them into features, and then ultimately you solve this regression problem. So this way you do the load forecasting, multiple linear regression based load forecasting.
So like in our model, we actually like didn't use ARMA method or
No, no,
like exponential method directly, but in feature engineering, we used the concept, right?
exactly. Yes.
Mm.
So because those methods will not give you the better accuracy because they have limited structure, right? So ARMA method, you can only have past items plus past errors. You cannot have like I mean, the term ARIMA constricts you, but in general, it's just a regression problem. So if you have just a regression problem, then why fix yourself to only ARIMA, right? You can have anything as a feature. So why I would not add it? The more feature I add, the more variance in the error I can explain, right?
Yeah, makes sense.
So, I mean, if peak was not an issue, I was always looking into the error, R squared error. So R squared error, suppose if you fit a model with ARIMA, the R squared error can be zero point 0.9 something, right? Zero point 0.9 say. Then you add some features, you see that your, like, if your feature will increase your R squared, that means they are capturing more information, right? So then you add more features and then you add like 0.98, like then 0.99, then you do not really improve. That means now you have enough, you have a very good model. So the more R squared value increase by including more features, the better your regression is, right?
Mm.
That means your model captures your dataset very well. If by adding new features, you cannot really have less than what you have before, because the features are really not that important, right? So never shy away from adding more features, because if your model have important features, the error will the error will not reduce, it will remain the same.
Mm.
Makes
So
sense.
you
But
better always have more feature than less feature. That's what I think. I mean, you can, if you feel that you are overfitting, remove the feature. That's it. But do not think from point of view that too much feature will reduce my quality of model. No, never. It is always good to have more feature. And for time series application, like I have seen people who solve regression problem, they bring the concept of this feature correlation into time series. No, never. If your features are correlated, it is good for time series. Did you hear the term
Collinearity.
multicollinearity? So this is not, if your data is time series, do not worry about it. If someone says that, why are you not considering multicollinearity in a regression problem? You say that, do you understand what type of problem this is? I want to capture I want to have multicollinear feature in this case. For time series, I want correlated features. I do not want for regression, other type of regression where feature correlation is bad. You remove those features. This is separate application, but this is time series application. I want correlation here. So in that case, you do not have to worry about multicollinearity problem in your time series prediction problem. And you are forecasting, you are not explaining. You are not doing explanatory analysis. If you are doing explanatory analysis, then separate problem. Explanatory analysis meaning that you are doing some experiment and trying to explain something. Suppose you want to explain the health impacts of smoking on probability of cancer, so from there you will remove those multicollinear feature, but here you will not do that.
Because like my for example, my past 5 hour AIL data might be like similar, right?
Exactly. So you will
And
remove, do you remove it? No, right? If someone who is not like know the time series analysis method, the ARIMA, just look at ARIMA model. Do you think multicollinearity, considering multicollinearity, you can have a ARIMA model? You will remove everything.
it will remove everything, yeah.
So
N minus 1, N minus
it
2
is
also.
written by the originator of ARIMA model that this is not a explanatory model. This is a predictive model. So for predictive model, I do not need to worry about whether my feature explains my why or not. It is not my concern. It is not my concern. I do not need to explain my history with the, like, I don't need to explain the impact of my predictor on the outcome as the explanatory manner. I want accuracy, predictive accuracy. If my prediction becomes accurate by adding more correlated features, I will do it in time series. This is my purpose in time series analysis. It is not my purpose to explain the result of the regression here. I think this is really important, and I have seen many PhD students do not understand this,
Mm.
Hmm.
but they are expert in machine learning somehow. I do not know how.
Hmm. Yeah,
So
maybe they are expert in different
exactly,
genre or
right? They are
something,
expert
maybe
in different things, but
different things.
like not in time series analysis. So time series is really different. So that's why many people struggle for 3-4 months just to learn about time series analysis, because everything they read in other parts of machine learning, it is always contradicting in here.
Mm.
So so it is really difficult to have a like a good expertise on time series for any people who are not doing time series as part of their job. Even I did not really understood a lot of the concept, but I used a lot of time series method in my past job in 2014 to 2018 on the forecasting, because Excel have lots of forecast function as well. So there
Mm.
I did something, but I really did not think about it from machine learning or ARIMA point of view, just regression point of view, and I didn't even consider about multicollinearity or anything, because most of the time I was working on time series data, right? Sensor data, machines output data. So it's always some time series data. So in time series you think differently, but in other parts of the like healthcare or economics or social science, you think differently. You do not really worry about time series data, but if you have time series data, you control the time series data. So there are other called controlled experiments in other parts of the I would say social science or economics literature. Even I was reading I am reading a book on econometrics. There I'm trying to learn the distinguishing features between time series analysis versus other things. So you have to think about it. Time series analysis is really different. And if possible, take a course on Coursera or other stuff to if you want to really learn deep about it. But it is really difficult. Time series courses are really difficult because the teaching quality, even in best universities, are really bad. And these are advanced courses, right? So advanced courses are always very boring. Like professors will just show you slides of equation and equation and equation, do not even show you any real example. So better read some case study type of paper.
Hmm. That's a good idea.
Yeah. Okay, so then I show you a just a model that from another paper, how they did it. So they make two model. One is called summer model and one is called winter model. So if you look at it, they only use temperature. So they created this square features, cube features. I try to do it in my models as well, right? I try to integrate some of this knowledge here. So baseload AI is baseload component is actually the beta knot of regression, right? So it will eventually come from the result. So they take this T-1, T-2 features. Did you see? Eugene, you are
Hmm.
mentioning about it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So look at the problem, because I think I do not really need to explain it because you guys are already know a lot about it, but just look at it, try to read it.
CI. What is TCI?
Oh, okay. I will,
TCI.
I will come up with, I will look into it. I think when I was clipping the slide, it cut.
Hmm.
Mm.
Maybe some threshold or critical point or something like that.
Yes, I think it may be becoming like a suppose 16 degree centigrade. Do you remember, Eugene, the Alberta like heating degree days, cooling degree days?
Oh,
Mhm.
right. It was around like a regular 18 or even 16 degrees, like
Yes,
normal temperature
yeah,
or something.
exactly. I think that is that temperature.
Yeah. It's kind of see like the offset how it is from the actual normal day temperature.
Mm. Even like when I was going through the PJM for load forecasting manual, they also do this kind of thing. Like
I did not
they,
really do it. So I did not really do it for Alberta because I was trying to see without doing that transformation how accurate my result is, right? So maybe you can do it for version 3. You guys can try it out.
Mm.
Hmm. Yeah, at some point we might have to do it, right? Like
Yes.
improving at least 1% might
Yeah,
affect a lot. Hmm.
exactly.
Mm.
Oh, I had one question. In your like the version one code, so you didn't have the hyperparameter tuning part of the code, right?
Yeah,
Like
that you did, right? So I
yeah.
used your hyperparameter tuning code.
So it is like in the different folder, right? Like in the
Okay,
test
so
model
this is
folder.
just, yeah. So this was in your base model by Habib. Another folder you say, there is another folder that you created.
Mhm.
It is already there. So I did not really change anything from your model. So you did the hyperparameter tuning that I asked, right? So I
Mhm.
just used that results.
And like for example, and one more thing is like when you if we in future like need to build version 3 or 4, so what on what basis we should compare? What's your opinion on that? Like
Yeah, I think most of the time I usually compare with the ASO's result, right? So try to improve more accuracy than the ASO's result. So this is the benchmark. So you have to, so suppose version 1 model, they sometimes beat the AS model, sometimes not. So version 2 has to have more better performance than that, right?
I mean, better performance in which period? Like daily basis, like uh, for example, on 2019 data or 2020 data, or might be like at will it be like at peak times or like general mean square error? Like
Yeah,
might
I think you should look into the. I mean, you should try to reduce the mean average error of the forecast, right? Mean error, mean or I mean, I will look into what I used in version 2. I think I used mean absolute error as a metric. So you can use this mean absolute error as your beating criteria, right?
mhm.
So
Mean
your
absolute error of a full year or like a
mean
month
absolute
or some.
by mean absolute error. So mean absolute error will always it is always scaled by according to your size of the test size, right? So always try to use the mean absolute error on the validation set or the unseen set in on the data. Suppose you are training your data and testing your model on 2019 data. So use the mean absolute error on 2019 data, or you're using 2021 data as your test set. So the mean absolute error of 2021 data can be used as a I would say measure of performance. So for version, so this is really not really that well defined yet, right? For the
Mhm.
Alberta, but
Mm-hmm.
you have come up with this good question: is that what should we do? What should
Yeah,
we
like moving forward, it will be
moving
important,
forward?
right?
I think moving forward, we will always use 2021 data as our validation because this is what really matters, right?
Mm-hmm.
But do you think do you not think that it will be biased? Like for example, if we only compare if you compare two models only based on 3 months,
Okay.
that
I
might be
understand.
biased, right?
So suppose you can use, I would say that by comparison, the the best practice that I read in different papers is that select 1 year of whole 1 year worth of data as a test data set.
Mhm.
So it is up. So the main issue is that which year, right? Is it 2019? Is it 2020 or is it 2021? So better, I think at this point in time, we should better stick to 2021 because this is what really matters, right? So if your model is best performing on the latest data set, this is what really matters.
Mm.
Makes sense.
So you have your model 1 or you have your model 2, train with the train and test around 2020 data, and then use the 2021, whatever days the 2021 has as a validation data set. So the model that will perform better on the 2021 data, you can use it as a benchmark error comparison. So I mean, there I think this is makes most sense for us because the model has to be accurate on the latest data. So why not do this? Because the paper they do not have that kind of requirement, right? They say that you have 1 year worth of test data set, but maybe it is not for us. It is not important.
Because
Mm.
we are solving an industrial problem, right? We will
Exactly.
need latest
Yeah, exactly. We are not
performance.
publishing paper. We are not publishing paper here.
Yeah, I always think like publishing paper that way, so that's why.
No. I mean, it is really common because I mean, in the publication community, they are really strict. So
Yeah,
they
they will
will
not accept
always,
only 2021 because they will say that in September what will happen. Maybe
yeah.
your model 2 will perform better than model 1, something
Yeah,
like
but
that.
I don't know. Like I have all the time in my hand to train as I please. But this paper, once I write it, it is done.
Mm.
So that's why I saw always people use very old data in paper. Like even they publish paper in 2020, they test their model on 2013 data because paper is not about operation, right? Paper is about performance.
You want to
So
see good results.
exactly, they are always focusing on some accuracy, which like if I have a model which is good on 2013 data, it is very easily you can publish. But can you apply it on current operations? No, right?
Mm.
So if you look into load forecasting papers, they always use 2017, 2016, 2015 data. Like why? Just to publish a paper, that's it.
Yeah, and just to compare with another paper that they improved
Exactly. Another paper
5% or
that maybe
something.
published in 2017, and that's why they did it, and to show them, well, this is better than that paper. So that's why I did it.
Mm.
Makes sense.
So you have to remember, right? So it is really important to read the paper, but also it is really important to ask questions like, is it really industrial, like industrial setting? Is it really like enough? So you can use, suppose if you want to use eventually 1 year worth of data, you have to use 20 from 2020 to 2021, but in 2020 there is COVID, so you cannot really use 2020 data.
Mm.
So better just stick to 2021 and continuously improve the model based on performance in 2021 and see and track it. Because if I was in 2018 and then 2019, then it would be really easy because there is no COVID or any other economic thing happen in between 2018 to 2019. So but now it is really challenging, right? Because 2020 load in Alberta is at any given point in time, most of the time you will see almost 150 to 200 megawatt less. I think
Mm.
that's why we have to add this error term on our forecast, because 2020 data is just a little bit less. So you have to always augment your forecast, or you can just remove 2020 data from your training data set if you want to. That is another way.
Mm.
Just train your model with 2018, 2019, and then test it on 2021.
But then your model will not have the latest data, right? Like,
Yes, exactly. So this is like this industry does not necessarily have all like in industrial application you always have to deal with this uncertainty. So this is your
yeah.
job. Like you cannot really have everything in perfect shape like you publish in a paper or something like that. So it is your duty to kind of like always come up with a reason to defend your work, right? So that's why I did it, that's why he did it. So this is your like this is also you have to kind of like defend that this is not a academic setting, so I will not do it.
Mm.
And also like about the peak calling, like we, for example, the model is already built, right? And like from the summer when our model will see the forecast, so we'll be have you already done the thresholds, like figure out the thresholds, like
I proposed a threshold. Okay, I will send the presentation to you as well. I think I did it right to you guys, or did I only share it to Mike? So let me
I
find it
didn't
out.
see. Yeah.
Yeah.
And like how, what was your plan and thought on this? You please also share with us,
Oh,
because for PGM.
so the way I think I have asked Eugene very recently to do something, because remember Eugene, you did
Yeah.
the AIL once there was CMD. So Thomas told there has to be two threshold. So how do you choose the threshold? So that's why I told Eugene to kind of look at it. So in the past 10 years or past, I think Eugene has the data from 2006. So almost 14 years worth of data. So you have 14 points for every month, 14 data points for every month. So for the two threshold, always select the minimum and maximum.
But like the minimum of like 14 years ago, like the electrical load for 14 years ago is going to be like a lot different
I mean,
than.
because that's what Thomas told. You have two thresholds.
Okay.
The first threshold, you just look into the forecast. You don't have to worry about it. The final threshold is the one that really matter.
Okay. So one is like kind of like a baseline.
Exactly.
Can you explain again? I missed it. Like I didn't get it properly.
Habib, so we have the coincident peak data for 14 years.
14 years.
And
Yeah.
for 14 years, if you want to define two threshold for every month, take the minimum and maximum of the 14th years for every month. That's what I say.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
So the first threshold, as Thomas mentioned, is just to kind of like help you to warm up. Like, hey, this threshold is crossing today. So that means something might be happening. And then the final threshold is the max of past 14 years. So if suppose in month of February, within the past 14 years, I analyze the CMD data and find out that the minimum is 9,800 megawatt and maximum is 11,300 megawatt. So this is what my two threshold are. So if your forecast is between these two threshold, then you alert. And
But
you
like,
only call peak if your load is close to the maximum threshold.
but like my question is like, normally this load is like has a trend, right? Like with years, it's increasing, like overall.
Yeah, I mean, you can like I'm just trying to be safe. That's why I call the 14 years. You can just take last 5 years, but that's up to you, right? See what how much the load has actually increased. So do you think that Alberta, because they are developed nation do not necessarily have a dramatic load increase. It is not like Bangladesh that 5 years later there would be 20,000 megawatt load, because the population has become from 10 crores to 20 crores. Here the population is decreasing, so the load basically remains flat. I think over the past 10 years, Alberta load has only grown 200 megawatt. So the minimum and the difference between the minimum and maximum should not be more than 1000 megawatt. That's what I think.
And I had one more question that was normally like Thomas or Mike, they normally are much worried about the day of the peak, right? Like instead of hours, they are like more
Yes.
concerned about which day the peak is occurring.
Yeah,
So,
so that's what the thresholds are, right?
mhm.
If your forecast shows that the threshold that your forecast is in between the threshold, then you call a peak, right?
So like, do you think like when we build a model, like building a new model, I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So when we are building a model, we should consider this thought during building the model. For example, uh, let's say that our Alberta model is not built yet. So we already know that for each month, what is the threshold minimum and maximum threshold of the AIL, right?
Yeah, I
So
mean you can call a peak based on the ASO forecast. You don't need to have a model, to be honest with you.
but like my concern is like we can do the should we like call a model good based on that or based on average mean square error,
I
like
think there's is two perspective. It's kind of looking right. Like for Ontario, we have like that's why we have like a couple models. One is kind of like predicting the overall load, and one is just like purely for which hour it is, and so on and so on.
Yeah, I
Isn't
think
it?
Habib, you need, like, in the customer side, you need to show the customer that you have a whole model, like not only for hour 17 or hour 18. So basically,
Mhm.
all I'm saying is that you can use the version 1, version 2 model as your overall forecast and then ensemble model as well. But to be more, if you want to be more accurate, you can build model only for hour 17, only for hour 18. Uh,
no, I'm not like asking about that. I'm just asking, for example, I'm not I couldn't explain properly. Like for example, you have version 1 model, version 2 model, and version 3, for example,
yes.
and you are trying to figure out which one is more accurate, like based on which metrics, right? Like you can use mean square, mean absolute error,
Oh, okay.
but mean
Yeah, I mean,
absolute
I
error
just because mean, like there, I say that stick to mean absolute error because it gives you the actual amount of the value, right?
actual amount of
If
error.
you
Yeah, I
use the
understand that.
squared error or other things, it
It is changed.
convolutes the concept.
Mhm. Yeah, I understand that. So, for example, we are using mean absolute error. Now, the question is mean absolute error of overall, or you will just stick into like the peak hours.
I
For
think the
example,
best, I
peak
think
hour.
yeah, I mean, the best model is always for empowered is the model that performs better at the peak. So not
Mm.
the whole hour. So even though I have version 1, version 2 model, the absolute error that I am using, I cannot really, like, there is no way you can make this on the, like, you can train a model only to kind of like capture the error during the peak. You can do it, like you, but you have to do it. Suppose you can do the hyperparameter optimization by minimizing the error only during hour 17. You can write it by yourself, but I have thought about it, but it will just take too much time to do so. That's why I did not do it,
Yeah. Okay. Makes
right?
sense. Yeah, it's really complicated. Like,
Like you have to
it,
define this loss function for a specific hour. So then for every train test split, you have to monitor it. It is really difficult. Nobody has done it. I have looked into a lot of papers. Nobody has done it. So if you really want to do it, just make another model for the peak hour. Simple. And then the forecast of that model, you just stick it with the other models. So remove the forecast for that hour and and just add the forecast of that peak hour model into that whole time series. Then it will be okay. I
Mm.
think I think ASO do this. ASO have a whole model, and then there I am 100% sure they have a separate model for hour 17 and hour 18, and they just stick those two models on top of the actual actual forecast, which is for 24 hours.
so
Mm.
our 17 and 18 model means like taking the features only on our 17.
Only on
like
our 17 and our 18. Yes.
sorry, the observations are only
Yeah, you
our
can
17.
just filter out the training data set from for the hour 17 and
Our
hour 18.
17.
Mm.
That makes sense too. And also like it, for example, if you want to like now build a model on New York based on New York data, then you build a model, right? The version 1. Then how do you express that this model is good? Like,
So
for example, if
for
me
New
and
York,
Eugene are doing the New York model and Mike asks that how good your model is, so how will we
yeah, so
defend ourselves?
I'm suggesting for both PJM and New York, take the data from 2005, not only the past 5 years, because this the Alberta like they have just lot more data and the markets are really big. So I thought about it, like only 5 years data, is it worth enough? Only have 5 years data to do. So I suggest that you take from 2005 to 20, to up to 2020, I would say 2019 data, and use 2017, 18, 19 as your test data set, and then see the peak values match or not, because all of your model for those New York and PJM, they are not only for monthly peaks, they should be for yearly peaks. So you have to run your model for entire year to calculate to compare the efficiency or to compare the accuracy. So suppose train the data train the data set. I mean, just take to 2010, right? From 2010 to 2015, sorry, 2017, sorry, 2010 to 2016. Use that as your training data set, and then run your model for 26, 17, 18, 19, and see for 3 years did your top 5 peaks match with actual top 5 peaks.
Match means like on based on date, like date or the value.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, after you run your model for 1 year and then you just sort the data set, then you will have top 5 hours, and then try to match it with the actual top 5 hours.
Mm.
Yeah.
Because that's different, because you cannot really like the thinking process from Alberta to New York would be a little bit different, because you are thinking about yearly peak, not even monthly peak.
Mm.
Just one day, it's really tough.
Just 1 day and 1 hour, right?
One day and 1 hour, yeah.
So of course you will have the flexibility of, usually you will ask the customer that I will have 10 calls. So you have 10 chances to fix the peak, to
Mm.
catch the peak, to be honest with you.
So my thought is like we'll first figure out the threshold by doing historical analysis, like for the
Yes.
PGM. Then we'll see in 17, 18, and 19 if we thought about that threshold, our model, and we call peak based on the threshold, based on our 17, 18, 19 forecast, and how accurate it is with the actual one, right?
Yes.
This is the best approach.
Yeah.
Makes
Mm.
sense. Hmm.
So it would be a little bit different thinking process rather than doing the Alberta model. So Alberta model is really tough to forecast, but it is easy to maintain because it is monthly, right?
Monthly, yeah.
For New
Right.
York or PJM, so the thinking process is same but different, like different than Alberta, right? So you have to take more training data in terms of like in terms of weather and non-weather related data set, and then use the 17, 18, 19 as your testing data set. Do not worry about 2020. And how you come up with threshold in New York and PJM based on past, right?
Mm-hmm.
Minimum, maximum,
Minimum maximum
Yeah.
is based on your past
or
observation.
median, or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, plot if you plot your plot your data from last 20 years on the top 5 peaks, if you see the distribution is if your distribution is skewed, then take the median, and if your distribution is normal, then take the mean, right?
Hmm.
Mm.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
I'm sure like it will not, like first time you will not get it. Like your model will always have error, lots of error. So you have to, like you have to think about it. How, like how many models eventually you will come up with, because you might have version 1, version 2, and then finally version 3, right? So
Mm.
I would not say that version 1 will be the most accurate, because version 1 is just help you to learn about it. Then version 2 will be better, and then version 3 will be more better. So finally, maybe by 3 or 4, you will have a good confidence model.
I think our new data scientist will be overwhelmed with all of these
I mean, you have to
things.
like you guys have to share this knowledge. Otherwise, like it is difficult job, right? Nobody tell this job is easy.
It's
So
really difficult job.
I mean,
Mm.
I mean, any data science job is difficult job, because every business operation is different, and everybody has some degree of complexity in their operation.
Mm.
So you have to like this is what it is, right?
Hmm.
Like why? Like I think everybody, like there should be a test, technical test, where you can ask the data scientist to make a better model than the New York forecast. Just make a better model.
Hmm.
Give him the actual data and the New York day ahead forecast data, and then ask him, just make a better model. Then you will really find out that someone is really cut out or not, because this Viva interview will never give you a better person. You have to see his code.
Mm.
Hmm. Makes
Like if
sense.
the person is experienced in time series forecasting, that is different matter.
Hmm.
That's why I have talked to a couple of people, and I told them that in your cover letter, write what you did on time series forecasting.
Hmm. Yeah.
Even load forecasting is different consideration in time series forecasting. Time series forecasting in general do not necessarily worry about peaks, right? It's just worry about aggregate error, average error. But now you have to worry about time, you have to worry about peak, you have to worry about top 5 peak, blah blah blah,
Mhm.
whole lot of bullshit.
And also it differs market to market.
Exactly.
One
The
CP, 5 CP.
market now. So it is really difficult. So empowered, I mean, empowered is solving difficult problems. That's it. I mean, this is the reality is. So it may seem easy, but actually, really, it is really difficult. And that's why Thomas said that the peak is always right called based on heuristic rather than actual model,
Mm.
Hmm.
because he knows the how many times he can call a customer. But the model, like you cannot really constrain a model to do so, right?
Mhm.
A model is a model, and it will give you the best based on its training data. That's it.
Hmm.
So how you take the decision has to be kind of like a mixture between operational constraint, then modeling result, and then finally the business the business impression. Because if you have like only 10 call per year, then you cannot really call the customer 11 times, right?
Mm.
So then finally, I just shown you that this model has they reported some coefficient. So even do you see Habib?
Yeah.
So they made like they have like winter model and the summer model, right? So eventually they sliced that 24-hour for in 6 different phases. So actually they built 6 different models.
Hmm.
6 for one season. Oh, sorry. It's
No, no.
one like it's one for winter and 6
Exactly.
for.
24-hour they switch the model.
Hmm. Should we do the same for Alberta?
I mean, you're welcome to do so, but I'm not going to tell you to do that, because managing 6 model. Do you remember do you think how much difficult it will be for you?
Hmm. No,
It
I
is
mean like breaking down into two, like one is summer and one is winter. Like for PJM is pretty
that
confident.
you can do.
Mhm.
That you can do, but do
Yeah.
not do it for summer 6 models. Oh my God, you will be out of your mind.
It will be
They
like more
paper, right? They
Advanced.
did it with publishing paper.
Hmm.
And for paper, you can do all this elephant, lion shit. You can do,
Just for once, right? Like for paper, you will just do once. That's it.
yes, exactly.
But
That's why.
like
But
we have
if
to do it like regularly. That's make our life.
training 6 models every day, do you think it is humanly possible for couple of people? If you have 20 data scientists, then it is possible.
And it is injustice to the climate too. Like
Exactly. Like the training, you will have hundreds of kilowatts of electricity, right?
yeah, carbon emission, something like that.
Yeah. So now you have the value. See TCI that you are saying. Look at it, TCI and TPI. So you see, in the summer they change, right? Sorry, in the winter they change the TCI constantly. No. They change the TCI based on the not the
Time interval.
time interval. Yeah.
So how they came up those values, like expert heuristics?
No, no. I mean, you know it for heating degree day in Canada, cooling degree day. These are like 16 to 18. Everybody knows it. So they did not use it, like they did not come up with something from like heaven or hell or something. They just made it. They just used the typical value, the what they need to use. It is Fahrenheit, so that's why it is looking a bit different.
Yeah, this is also a really good idea. Like uh, keeping like 6 models. Like moving forward, I'm not like if NPower gets really big, then
Yeah,
these things
exactly.
can
Then
be
you will
implemented,
have it,
right?
right? Because what will people do? Like, I did not do it because I'm just one guy making all these models, all this thinking. So thinking takes a lot of time, right? So coding is one part, but thinking, managing, like organizing, like it is too much on your brain, to be honest with you.
Makes sense.
Like only 3 people, like you and I and Eugene, we will never achieve this because it is just we need at least 6 people to do so. Everyone will have one model. That way it is really possible to do so for one market because everybody will work on multiple models. So I can really work on 2 models every day, right? Two models at best, because it is really difficult. Morning one model, then afternoon another model. So but I cannot really change 6 model every day. It is humanly impossible. They did it because they are publishing paper. So
And they only did it one time too, right? I mean, it's not.
Just one time, yeah.
Yeah.
but if that idea is good. If you
Idea
have
is really good, yeah.
human, like if you have human resource, then you can sectionalize the model. Like you can have 24 model for 24 hours. Why not, right?
Yeah. And
For
how
sure.
frequently we need to train our model, like normally?
I would say that you, like, I mean, based on the operation, right? Uh, if you see that for some months, analyze the historical data. For some months, the range of the minimum maximum may be very large. So then you have to like train your model maybe more times in that year, in that month. And if you see that minimum maximum is kind of same, then you don't have to worry about it. You're recording it, guys. You can watch it later, so don't have to write it.
I just writing the key points.
Yeah. No worries. So this is, so people are using all sorts of things. I'm pretty sure that ASO has this type of analysis, like they sectionalize the model. I'm sure they have a separate model for 17, 18, 19. They have. I'm 100% sure. But for us with very small team, it is really difficult to do so. We have to try, but I mean, up to you. Then finally, this picture, this is the final slide. You already know it. This is just to show you the overall architecture, nothing.
Yeah, understood. ALDB means like all non-weather
Non-weather
database and weather database. Yeah, makes sense.
So this is the end of today's lecture. I will have more tomorrow, so you can stop recording.
Okay, how to